Okay, the morning after the night before and reaction in the Spanish front pages. José Lu de mi vida, José Lu of my life, basically. Everyone's favourite player at Real Madrid after everything we saw. So that's the media's reaction. Let's hear more now from the Bayern camp itself. Here is Thomas Tuchel and Matthijs de Ligt.
Natürlich nehmen wir die an, aber wissen Sie, es ist Halbfinale. Es ist nicht der Moment für Entschuldigungen, ehrlich nicht. Es ist echt nicht der Moment für zwei so krasse Regelverstöße und danach Entschuldigung. Es ist einfach nicht der Moment. Alle müssen ans Limit. Alle müssen leiden. Alle müssen fehlerfrei spielen. Dann müssen halt die Schiedsrichter auf diesem Niveau das auch tun. Das hilft halt nicht, wenn du nachher Entschuldigung sagst. Dafür bist du auf dem Feld, dafür bist du der Beste, den es da draußen gibt. Und dann erwarten wir das auch bis zum Schluss. Und wenn du das nicht liefern kannst, dann hilft das in dem Moment nicht, eine Entschuldigung. Auch wenn wir die natürlich als Sportsmänner annehmen, aber ja, damit ist es irgendwie nicht getan.
I don't know if it's offside. I don't know. The only thing that I know is that I think we make rules in the football. And especially now with the VAR, a lot of times, if it's not clear offside, you keep playing. And if you are in the last minute of a semi-final match between Bayern Munich and Real Madrid, and you are not clear, you cannot put the flag up, and you cannot whistle. Maybe you can put the flag, but you still keep playing. And this is for me, something that is, I have to be honest, it doesn't look good. Let's say it this way for the referees. But in the end, we lost. It's not the referee's fault. In the end, we lost. Madrid win, so they deserved it. And extremely disappointing.
Let's open up the conversation and welcome more people in. Frank Leboeuf with us, Sid Lowe and Stewart Robson as well. Frank, let me start with you. The stage is yours. We know you love a refereeing mistake. What have you got to say here?
It's simply, well, nothing to do with Madrid. I mean, what Madrid showed yesterday and the reaction that they had, I mean, that was absolutely fantastic. Again, the fairy tale of the spirit of Real Madrid carries on, but from Bayern's side, it's a robbery. I mean, of course you cannot accept apologies. It's crazy. And suddenly you decide to go the other way and do it almost before anything happens. That's a semi-final of the Champions League. I think about the players more than the fans or the club. The players who never played a Champions League final would have a chance to play a Champions League final, and because of a referee mistake, they can't do it. Well, maybe they would have to go to extra time and lose against Madrid, but let's say they would have a chance to play the semi-final. I thought when I played the World Cup final that if I lost because of a referee mistake, I would be so bitter about that I could be able to chase the referee again if I would have seen it in my life again. So the consequences of what happened yesterday for the Bayern players are awful, really awful.
Stewart Robson, a man of reason. Referee and team made a mistake here. It's fair to say that, isn't it?
It is. I mean, the linesman put his flag up too early. That's an obvious mistake. And the referee blew the whistle too early. So they couldn't go to VAR because the whistle had already been blown. But I'm not so sure that Bayern would have scored in that situation because the goalkeeper didn't dive. The whistle went long before De Ligt got his shot in, which was wrong. But I'm not sure they would have scored from the situation. So I don't think they were absolutely robbed. It was just poor refereeing and a poor judgment by the assistant referee to put his flag up so quickly. That shouldn't have happened.
See, it was going to be all right anyway, Frank. Who's to say they would have scored?
Sorry? Oh, well, you know, I think at the end of the day, Real Madrid deserved to go through. I love the way they reacted. I love the spirit of it. And if Bayern did what they had to do, because they played well, I was pretty much surprised. But the spirit, the atmosphere, I mean, that was crazy. And it's nice to see, and I think it's nice to get something out of it. When you give so much into the field, like you feel the passion and the love of it, I was happy to see that.
Sid, if Marca, we just saw their front page, went with José Lu, you beauty. Obviously, up in the Catalan press, we saw the word controversy, controversial. What has been the reaction in Spain to this specific moment in the game?
Well, you've kind of framed it perfectly there, Kay, because, of course, as you know, in Spain, the reaction always depends on which side of the divide you're on. And there's always the weight that you give to this always depends on your starting point. Now, it is true that this has been discussed a lot in Spain. It's been talked about. And I think, in a way, it's a really kind of clear case, isn't it? Because this isn't a case of a referee interpreting something wrong. It isn't a case of a referee taking a decision with a penalty, say, that can go one way or the other. It's not the case of a really tight offside. It's referees getting effectively the rules of engagement wrong, the protocol wrong, the processes that they're supposed to follow wrong, and that idea that the linesman's flag goes up too quickly, the referee's whistle goes too quickly. If you have VAR, and obviously let's not get into my opinions on VAR, if you have VAR and that changes the way in which you referee, then this shouldn't happen. Because part of the process of this now is, OK, you've got that safety net, so you allow that safety net to help you make this decision so you don't make it in a way that basically gives you no way back. And that's the fundamental point. I'd also quite like to pick up on what Frank said, and I think it's really important, actually. We often sit in judgment of players when they react badly. We often say, you know, a player has gone in the face of the referee or he's complained after the game and isn't it terrible? And I think Frank's just made a really, really key point. The amount that is on the line for players, the pressure that they are under, everything that these kind of decisions can cost them, whether it's right or not to complain about them. And obviously we would prefer players to be able to accept it. I personally think it's amazing that players don't lose their heads more often, given how much is on the line and given what a decision like this can mean for them. Again, let's go back into it. That doesn't necessarily mean that Bayern would have gone through. It doesn't even necessarily mean that they would have scored this. But I'm often surprised, actually, how calm players manage to be, given how much there is at stake for them.
Yeah, it's obviously tough when you get those calls go against you to keep your cool,
absolutely. And while, yes, I agree with everything that everybody just said, and clearly Real Madrid players stopped, and that had an effect on whether De Ligt got a shot off, whether it found the back of the net, Lunin didn't dive. If you're Bayern Munich, you want to see that play out. You want to see that play come to an end. You do not want the referee making the decision as to, yes, you would have scored, or no, you would not have scored, which in effect is what the referee did. He took that option away from Bayern Munich. Now, I totally understand that play was a long way from finish. It couldn't go back. It couldn't be reviewed. But you don't want to see referees make mistakes, that kind of mistake, at this kind of the game. And from a player's perspective, it's easier to accept in league games. And we saw a similar situation with Real Madrid a few weeks ago in a league game. As tough as it was to accept in the moment, a league is adjudged over somewhere between 30 and 40 games, depending on where you play. And you feel that some of these small decisions, even with VAR, can't come out in the wash. In a Champions League semi-final, there's no coming back from this. There's no, well, next game we might get a decision in our favour. And it becomes all the more difficult to accept. In a very difficult season for Bayern Munich, all of a sudden, what should be or could have been defining in terms of this campaign has been taken, or that moment has been taken away from you unfairly. It was a referee mistake that should not have happened.
Robbo, if we do get back to the game, though, you were on the World Feed commentary for this game. You obviously called both teams for us here at ESPN. What was your overall reaction to what you saw yesterday?
Well, I thought Real Madrid were the better side, and it was a goal out the blue a little bit in the second half from Bayern Munich. A great bit of play by Davies. But going back to the management of the game in the later stages, when Bayern were 1-0 up and there was about 10 minutes to go, I thought that Thomas Tuchel's decision-making and substitutions were horrendous. And I'm doing the commentary and I'm saying, Kim's come on for Sané. Sané didn't play well. They needed Sané to play well. He didn't play well. But when there's 6 minutes to go, are you telling me that Harry Kane couldn't play on for another 6 minutes? And what about if Real Madrid did equalise? You know, there was all these problems. Players going down trying to waste time, going down with cramp. At one point, with 5 minutes to go, or 4 minutes to go, they were playing with 10 men because Pavlovic was down the end of the field getting some treatment. They had to make a decision. Do we get Goretzka on, who was left out the side? But there were too many poor decisions, I thought, by Thomas Tuchel. He put Kim on, I assume, to be a third centre-half. He put Mazraoui out to the other side. I can understand that, to maybe defend Kimmich a little bit. But he didn't put Davies back to a left wing-back. He put him still at left wing, and Kim had to play as a narrow left-back. There were so many mistakes that I thought Thomas Tuchel made in that last 10 minutes, and the way that Bayern tried to manage it, they deserved to get beaten in that last 10 minutes.
Robbo, obviously Kane, it's come out afterwards, did say he had a back problem, and that's why he was subbed out.
6 minutes to go. 6 minutes to go, and he was still holding up the play. He was still switching the play. You've got 6 minutes to play from you being in the Champions League final. And either the player said to Thomas Tuchel, we want to come off, which I wouldn't say was the case, or Thomas Tuchel decided to make those decisions. And I think Harry Kane tried to back his manager up so he didn't get too much stick. I thought there were some really poor decisions by Thomas Tuchel, and maybe some poor decisions by the players to try and time waste and not focus on the game. At 1-0, they had a great opportunity. Müller picked up the ball, won the ball. They had a 4 versus 1. And if they'd been focusing on the football rather than doing other things, they could have gone and got the second goal. Instead, the pass by Müller wasn't good enough. The next pass wasn't good enough. And suddenly Modric got back and made a challenge. That last 10 minutes was really poor from Bayern Munich.
And of course, Sid, it was Real Madrid at the Santiago Bernabeu on a Champions League night. And even the banner ahead of the game said, Real Madrid never give in. It just feels almost inevitable with them.
Yeah, it does, and I think that's another reason why, and to pick up where Robbo left off, why it seems like a strange decision to try and resist Real Madrid, because if all you've got is resistance, the chances are that the resistance will get broken. You know, if you're not offering anything else, if you're not going to give yourself the chance to find a way through, then you're probably going to get broken, because the momentum will build, because the game will go on, because they will keep coming at you, because there will be a mistake at some point. Now, it's not to say it's impossible to hang on. Of course it's not. Occasionally it will happen. But if you invite Madrid to keep going at you, then it feels like the final process is almost inevitable. Now, it's true that Bayern had a couple of chances to have won it. That break that Robert was talking about there, the header against the bar, the Harry Kane shot into the side netting, there were a few moments. And actually, funny enough, Neuer's mistake in the goal is preceded by another mistake, in my opinion. That throw that he does out to the left wing is just baffling in my mind. I see no reason to do that at that stage of the game. But as you say, Madrid's momentum built and built and built, and they eventually got there. And it did feel a little bit inevitable, albeit it's easy to say that after the event, isn't it? But once that momentum builds, you can't assume that you're going to be able to withstand it.
We did hear... Go on.
Hold on a second. So, I don't get this. I don't get the thing, Robbo, that you're really harsh with Harry Kane. There's 6 minutes to go, and you, as they stand, you're in the Champions League final, and you've got a guy whose back's done. So you're going to take a chance on leaving him on the field, which means that if he can't get around the field, you're a man down before you start. That doesn't make any sense. I'm sorry. With 6 minutes to go...
Did he look as though he couldn't get round the field? He kept on holding up the play. He was the one player that could hold up the play and switch the play. He looked tired, but so did several other players. Other players were going down with cramp.
The chance he had on his left peg that hit side netting, it was like he was swinging a 2-ton weight on his left side. I mean, Harry Kane doesn't hit the side net.
It doesn't matter whether he was injured or he could play in the Champions League final now, whether he's fit enough. He hasn't.
Forget the name.
Because they lost.
Forget the name, Robin. 6
6
minutes to go. What do? Do I take a guy off whose back's done, or do I take a chance and keep him on and we lose a goal because we're down half a man, maybe, if you want to put it that way? And then he's not good to you in extra time anyway. You know, listen, at the end of the day, Manuel Neuer has cost this team. We can talk about the referee's, the linesman's decision and the referee's decision and everything else, but Manuel Neuer is the reason that Bayern Munich are not in the Champions League final. That's the bottom line.
Let's get to Neuer in a minute. I want to know what Frank thinks of the Harry Kane situation that the guys are arguing over here. Frank?
Well, you know, I think he could have stayed, but I also understand what Stevie is saying. But I think what I regret is that Tuchel decided to get rid of all the offensive options and brought, you know, defenders to secure and also to gain some time, you know, with the substitutions. But as Robo said, you know, if Real Madrid scored a goal, you know, and they did, you have no options to react. And it's only De Ligt who had the chance to score if the referee wouldn't have whistled before. So I've seen that with many coaches nowadays who want to secure with, instead of finishing the job, they try to to say, okay, 1 goal, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, now we drop and we park the bus. I mean, you always open a door of somebody which can happen. And especially as we said, you know, Real Madrid was having options or chances to score. So I'm not sure Kane should have gone out, but you know, and maybe it's an excuse from Tuchel to explain why they did it. But and I'm not sure Kane staying on the field would have helped Bayern to secure the score.
As far as Kane goes, and listen, if his back is hurting him and he can't continue, okay, we will have to accept that as an excuse. But from my perspective, there was nothing I saw in his performance that suggested that he was that hurt that he couldn't carry on, at least to see the game out. And while I can sympathise with the midfield three, the other 3 substitutions, I think the one thing that Harry Kane gives to Bayern, and that causes Real Madrid a lot of problems, or certainly caused on the night, is his playing in the half spaces, where Rudiger isn't quite sure where to push up and isn't able to use his physicality as he has. And Choupo-Moting is not that player. So while you bring on Choupo-Moting to maybe lead the line and he's the outball, he's not the one that kind of drags Real Madrid's centre-backs a little bit out of position. Maybe Thomas Müller can, but Thomas Müller isn't the player that he once was, and defending a lead, he's not. That his first option isn't to play in that half space between the midfield and the defence. So for me, I thought the substitution of Harry Kane took a lot away from Bayern Munich in terms of at least keeping the ball in that half of the park when they got it.
Can somebody explain to me why they took Harry Kane off if he wasn't injured? Or he wasn't able to carry on? Because I don't think there's one of us, in all honesty, if Harry Kane's not hurt or not able to continue, there's not one of us would take Harry Kane off, and I've got to think that Tuchel's in the same boat. Why would you take Harry Kane off if he's not injured? Or he's not capable of carrying on? It makes no sense to take him off. For what? He has to be injured. Somebody explain why Thomas Tuchel would take Harry Kane off if he wasn't injured.
No idea, but he didn't look as though he was struggling.
Come on.
He still had 2 or 3 shots. He still had 2 or 3 shots. He still didn't look as though he was struggling. We saw it with Pep Guardiola said it about Erling Haaland in the game against Real Madrid when he took him off in extra time. And then they say, oh, because Erling Haaland's injured. Well, he only played a week and a half later. He was OK to play on.
Well, he never played the next game, though.
Erling Haaland said to the coach, I don't want to play anymore. I'm struggling. I don't think Harry Kane ever looked across to the bench, because I was doing the commentary, I was there. He never looked across to the bench once and said,
let alone for somebody who has stood at the top of the position for as long as he has. I just didn't expect it. I don't think anybody expected it. And again, it only kind of shows the frailties of being a goalkeeper in today's game.
OK, let's get word from Carlo Ancelotti after this game, because he had some high praise from for his squad. He said they have an incredible mentality. I'm really grateful because they work really hard and it's a fantastic atmosphere. They are very humble, really generous. I think it is the best squad I have had in my career. Now, that is some praise from Carlo Ancelotti when you think of the squads, even the Real Madrid squads that he's had, the Milan squads, all the top teams that he's managed. That is some praise, Sid Lowe.
Yeah, it is. And I think, of course, the context to it is exactly the way that he frames it. This isn't just about saying this is the best squad in terms of the players, because, of course, he would have worked with players who would walk into this Real Madrid team, even though this is a very good Real Madrid team. He's worked with some of the best footballers in the world. He's talked about basically having worked with all of them except for Totti and Messi. They're the 2 players that he would have really liked to have done and hasn't. But it's not really about that. It's about him framing it in those terms, that this is a good squad to work with. This is a squad where you don't have players confronting you. This is a squad where you don't have really significant fault lines within it, where you don't have a problem of egos, where you don't have a problem of players not getting on with each other. And in that sense, it's relatively easy to work with. Now, of course, one of the reasons it's easy to work with is because Ancelotti is so good at that side of the game. but it's been easier for him than it has at other places. In the build-up to this game, he was talking about his role at Bayern Munich and why that didn't last very long and why they sacked him quite early into his second season. And of course, one of the problems with them was that some of the changes he was trying to do were difficult with some of the dressing room heavyweights, and he felt, and he said this in the preview to the game, that he didn't get the support from Bayern Munich that he needed to be able to do his work well. Now, at Real Madrid, he's been able to manage that dressing room, so I think that's the key to what he's saying here, is that these are really good footballers. Obviously, they are really good footballers. But on top of that, this isn't a group that causes you the kind of problems that sometimes comes with managing superstars.
And what's going to happen when Mbappe comes next season then, Sid?
Well, that's the question everyone's asking. Obviously, in fairness, I think most people are asking this about the positions of the players on the pitch. So we saw it in this game, and we've seen it quite a bit this season, that both Vinicius and Rodrigo would rather play off the left-hand side. Yes, they can come in and be a little bit narrow at times, and Vinicius has kind of evolved his game a little bit to play a bit more inside rather than out on the left wing. But that's their preferred position, and that is Mbappe's preferred position. So unless you massively overload the left side, which of course they could do, I suppose, in theory, and have an asymmetrical lineup, they do need to find a solution to that. And I think that's been the way it's framed, in terms of putting the players on the pitch in the right positions, rather than in terms of that kind of dressing room harmony and whether or not there might be fault lines that open up. That, I think, is a much longer-term question to see whether Mbappe is at all problematic in that sense. But I think fundamentally the question is, which position do you put those players in?
That's an interesting one, isn't it, Sid? And I just wonder what the talk is right now, because it felt when Mbappe first didn't come to Madrid, when it was expected that he would, it felt like there was this real big need for him to be there. Does it feel like it's not talked about as much now because we're seeing this version of Vinny? Or is it just because they think he's coming anyway and it's all going to happen?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think the answer is a little bit of both of those things. It's not really a kind of... It doesn't have that weight, that question, partly because there is just the assumption that he just does come now. As you say as well, the fact that Vinicius has played really well, maybe there isn't the urgency to bring him, which is why, as I say, the question mark really is about how you fit these pieces together. You know, not that there's any doubt about whether you have them, not that there's any doubt that anyone is going to start and that someone else is going to have to sit on the bench. They will both start. I think a couple of years ago, you might have thought, you know what, if you had to let Vinicius go to bring Mbappe in, perhaps you do it. I don't think anyone would do that now. Which isn't to say anyone would say, hey, don't bring me Mbappe. Then they absolutely do want him. But there is a sense now that what you have to do is find a way of them both playing. I think as well, it's worth remembering that this is the way it feels right now in May. If you go back to August or September, I think there was a belief that Real Madrid was short up front. Because, of course, Karim Benzema went a year earlier than expected. Harry Kane was the player that Carlo Ancelotti had identified as someone who could come in now and play up front and be a really good forward that would link those wide players into the game as well as score goals himself. And they didn't go for Kane, partly, of course, because they knew that Endrick was coming and they knew that Mbappe would probably come. And so then what you do is you go and buy Joselu on loan, 1.5 million euros loan fee from second division Espanyol to give you the backup there, but you create a new forward line. And you create a new forward line with Bellingham as a sort of false nine, with Vinicius playing on the left but sometimes going inside, with Rodrigo going to the right-hand side but also coming inside at times, and trying to find a way of making it work. And that was then, and at that point I think a lot of people would have thought, I'm not sure this really works. Madrid do need that striker. They could really do with Mbappe now. Now, fast forward to where we are now, 9 months on, and obviously it doesn't look quite so urgent. But that's not to say, as I say, this is really important, that is not to say that anyone thinks, don't bring him. In fact, the opposite is true. Everyone's now looking at this Real Madrid team and thinking, they're good already. Imagine how good they're going to be when Mbappe turns up as well. Frightening.
So obviously Sid offered up the context there in which Ancelotti was speaking and the fact that it's the squad harmony and saying that, yeah, you know, some of his former team players may have walked into this Real Madrid side right now. But let's have some fun anyway, shall we? Because we went back to take a look at the 2005 starting 11 for Milan under Carlo Ancelotti. And Stevie is absolutely a Milanista in this sense of the words right now. You were like, no way is any Real Madrid player getting in there. He said maybe Courtois to begin with, right?
Right. I mean, the thing is, over time you do sort of forget. But then when you go and look at it on paper, my goodness, look at this. Look at, for the start, look at the back four. Maldini, Nesta, Stam and Cafu. I mean, seriously. Pirlo, Seedorf, Kaká, Gattuso. Now, Gattuso you need because of what he does on the field. And then up front, Shevchenko and Crespo. I mean, really? Dida for Courtois. Maybe Modric or Kroos for Gattuso. That's about it, isn't it?
You see,
I mean, where would you play Vinny? Do you take Crespo out and play Vinny? I'm not so sure. Because with what they have in the middle of the park, it's a different type of game as well. You know, is he going to get that amount of time to be running at people all the time? Where you got Crespo and Shevchenko getting played in by Kaká coming late, a la Bellingham. You got Seedorf picking people out, dropping balls in. You got Pirlo picking people out for fun. I mean, that team is absolutely scary.
How did that game end?
It just shows you why we play the game. There's a reason why we don't play the game on paper. There's a reason why you have to step on the field, because you never know. That was an anomaly. What happened with Liverpool that game? That team is absolutely sensational.
I mean, there are players of a generation all over that park. And to Stevie's point, absolutely, yes, you have Courtois over Dida. But let's be honest, Real Madrid have played most of this season without Courtois. You'd have Dida over Lunin. So, I mean, it's so difficult to make these comparisons for any number of reasons. But goodness me, you look at that. What were we? So just short of 20 years on. In 20 years' time, how many of those players that are playing for Real Madrid now will invoke the kind of sentiment that Milan team does presently? I think 4, maybe 5. I'm not sure the 9 that we're kind of pointing to now.
Robbo, do you care to wade in on this Milan versus Madrid?
I mean, in terms of individuals, the Milan side is much better. It's got much better players. But what I think Ancelotti's talking about is the spirit, the squad. Remember, it's not just Courtois that's been out. It's been Eder Militao that's been out for most of the season. Alaba's, they were the two first picks at centre-half. So the players that have come in, Rudiger and Nacho or Tchouameni going back in there at times, they've done a fantastic job. When they need somebody to come on the field, they took Kroos off yesterday and Modric came on and started to dictate the play. They made good decisions. You know, Vinny Jr., who didn't have his best first half, but in the second half, he went out to the left wing and said, I'm going to take on Kimmich. And he changed the game. So they've got players that have got good football understanding. They seem to have a good team spirit. And they've got that belief that they can win games even when they're not playing well. And that's why I think he calls them one of the best squads he's worked with.